Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hunting for Silver Linings. Today is our second episode that we're recording. We were in Barcelona, Spain earlier today, and now we are in the Great Lakes region of the U.S., Grand Rapids, here with myself, Corey Hart, Chapter Director of Startup Grand Rapids. We have Thomson Dawson with us from White Hot Center, and Yorgo Katsanos, you're still in Oklahoma City, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Great. Thomson, so glad to have you and connect with you.
Thanks for having me.
Wondering if you could first give us a little introduction on your background. Right now, people are coming to this without even understanding, what your expertise is.
Oh, well, I am a management consultant. I specialize in working with early stage companies, founders and their leadership teams in early stage companies, helping them to develop their brand strategies, helping them to build their competitive advantage through their business strategy, through their marketing, through their communications, and through how they face the market. I've been doing it for longer than I want to admit.
Well,
this is 2021 is my 40th year.
That's awesome. When you and I met, it was I had just started the Grand Rapids chapter.
Right, startup grind, yeah.
I just started the chapter, and you came. You were one of the first that came out of the community and said, "Hey, this is really cool."
It is cool.
And then I learned that you had spent many years in California,
Right.
after having already developed quite the large branding operation, marketing operation here in Michigan. So you've been working in multiple ecosystems and internationally.
Right.
So,
I've worked for here in West Michigan. Most of the clients that I worked with were large global organizations, mostly in the office furniture industry, as you can imagine, being a West Michigan-based industry. And in the many years in California, I was working with medical device organizations, healthcare organizations, consumer packaged goods companies, a diverse spectrum of organizations, mostly global organizations. And then in the last 10 years or so, I got focused in the startup community, particularly in Southern California, and that led to a decision that I wanted to spend the rest of my consulting years working with early stage companies, which I found completely fascinating.
well, that's a nice brief background. Now, Yorgo here had mentioned before we hit record that he's been paying attention to your commentary and attitude and outlook as you've been posting on LinkedIn. And maybe, Yorgo, you could speak a little bit about your impressions, and then that leads us to why we even invited Thomson in the first place, right?
Well, first of all, you don't find very often consultants who are consistent in their approach. And I think you, Thomson, have done that throughout the years from what we have seen. To me, what is also very interesting is that you focused on startups. May I ask you to start with, why are you focusing on startups? What do you find so interesting, other than the ignorance of some of the founders of the rudimentary?
Well, that's a good. Well, after 3+ decades of working in large corporate organizations, and as you can appreciate, there's a certain amount of bureaucracy and complexity that comes with working with large organizations. And when I started working with founders, I could really see where I could make an impact and a difference in their thinking, much more so than working with a large organization where obviously, we were one of many types of organizations that these large corporations worked with, and our ability to make a real significant impact in the direction or trajectory of their business. We have to, obviously do the right things and make clients happy. But working with founders and their leadership teams, I could really see in a short period of time that the work and the guidance that I would be involved with would really make a big difference. And that was very gratifying to me, as I could see very quickly the shift in their business. And of course, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and I just resonate with that mindset, that innovative mindset to bring, new value to the world. True, a lot of founders they're very tactical, as you could appreciate. It's difficult to get them to lift their heads up out of their business and think strategically about their business. Just because at the early stages of companies, they're scrappy. Every day is a survival issue, and but when they finally step back from the tactical aspects of their business and really take a long view of who they are, what they do, why it matters to whom, and how their desired image and reputation can affect their competitive advantage and ultimately their growth, to that next level. I think the big challenge for most of the clients I work with is they're trying to get over that 7-figure sales barrier, get that $1 million sales revenue. When they get to that level, the ability to scale their business is a lot easier, because they have customers, they have a customer base, they have a proven concept, they have the infrastructure in place, the operational aspects in place to really scale the business. But when you're in that early 6-figure level, it's a little more difficult. But again, the challenges are always there, no matter what your revenues are. So I think for me, it's just being around creative founders who are bringing new value to the marketplace. I find that a fascinating arena to work in.
Thank you. This is quite important for us as well here at Startup Grind, but also in the Hunting for Silver Lining, because what we have noticed, and it's well documented by various research pieces, that 90% of job creation comes from startups. There's no doubt about it.
Small business, yeah, right.
Yeah, small business. So that is important thing to recognize. But also you're touching on a couple of things. First of all, there's a big difference between tactics and strategy. And sometimes young entrepreneurs confuse the two, as they're beginning to move from a product to a company, and as they're developing from a company to a multi-product platform. Now, in one of your writings, you talk about the 4 pillars of influential startup business and brand. Can you expound a little bit on for the benefit of our interlocutors or our friends?
Yes, entrepreneurs are hyper focused on raising capital and seeking out private equity growth partners that can help them scale their business, and a lot of them have adopted the conventional wisdom that marketing is the source code for building an influential company, and that kind of puts the cart before the horse, in my opinion. I think that marketing in and of itself tends to be more of an inhibitor to early stage companies if the founder isn't in the right mindset and doesn't have what I call the 4 pillars. They don't have their ability to strengthen those 4 pillars, and they are, first of all, the first pillar is vision. You have to have a strong vision that becomes an operating principle in your business, and not just a pipe dream in your head, but a vision that comes out of your own mind and becomes an operating principle amongst your organization. The ability to have a vision that other people, as you build your company, that vision becomes essentially the organizing principle that drives every decision in the business, helps the, attract the right people in the right seats on your leadership team, helps you build a culture that is customer focused. And of course, that leads to the next pillar, which is your ability to strengthen your leadership capabilities, the ability to not just lead by chain of command, but lead by inspiration, by values, core values, the what I call the spiritual DNA that drives who you are, why you matter to people, and having your business strategy be based on the core values of your leadership. The third pillar, of course, is value creation, the ability to innovate new value in the marketplace rather than competing for the value that already exists. If you're of a mindset where you're bringing products to market that are simply incremental iterations of what's already there, you're essentially competing for the value that already exists. So that tends to put you in a position where you're competing on price. And when you become a value creator and you start bringing new value to the marketplace, then you become kind of in a category all by yourself, what I call a category of one. And that is the goal, is to bring new value to the marketplace rather than compete for the value that, of course, already exists in the category that you happen to be in. And then the final pillar is impact, your ability to actually impact for the better. What I like to say is elevate the condition of the customer from one state to a higher state, where you're making a real impact in the lives of your customers. And when you do that, your business, your brand becomes the one and only choice of those particular customers. So vision, leadership, value creation, and impact are the four pillars that build an influential company. And founders have to develop their muscle in those four categories. They have to strengthen those four categories, because those pillars essentially are what supports the weight of the business going forward.
Thank you. That's very, very interesting, because you're touching on the whole scope of corporate growth, but also corporate management, because what we're beginning to see is that this acceleration that we've noticed in 2020 has impacted on growth, but only in terms of imbalances. In other words, when you're looking at the human capital, for instance, we're seeing significant imbalances that are, at least at some level, illustrating lack of vision, lack of leadership, lack of value, and lack of impact. In other words, we, the consumer, are to some extent left out of the equation. And we're only looking, just look at the capital markets. The equity market is driven by 5 companies, right? So what do you think is really going on here? Because you're advocating a solid approach based on these 4 pillars of defining yourself and your company. And we don't see that around.
And again, these pillars are qualitative. They're not, it's not a quantitative idea. It's qualitative. It's something that you measure your strength in those 4 areas over time, but at the beginning they seem like for a founder of a small startup, they seem like fairly esoteric principles that where the founders go, well, that's all really good, but I need a customer. And from my experience in working with early stage founders, and let me define an early stage founder. An early stage founder is a company that is less than $1 million in revenue. that is the marker. You get a 1 million to 10 million, that's where your business begins to develop the processes that enable it to scale. But before that $1 million level, it's still about acquiring customers, those customers that become the early stage advocates of your business. And let's face it, if at that level, you don't have big marketing budgets. So the key is to build early on, step by step, a base of customers that become essentially your non-paid sales force. They become the early advocates of the value that you bring to the market. And it's from that early connection that all of the growth, comes after. And that's especially true. Well, it's true for B2B, and it's true for consumer-based products. That early base of advocate customers is very, very important. And in order to get that going, you do have to have a vision. In other words, what matters to you, what's important to you as an entrepreneur, in the parlance of our time, the why, if you will, what's important to you has to also be rewarded by the marketplace. So those 4 pillars strengthen the ideas that matter to you, the founder, and connect with what the marketplace rewards. I'll give you an example. Back in the early 80s, there were 2 watch companies, Casio and Seiko, were battling each other for technical precision in quartz watches, thinking that the market was all about technical precision and all of that sort of thing. And while that was going on, unbeknownst to Casio and Seiko, a Swiss watchmaker thought, well, maybe people just sort of take, the ability of a watch to keep time as a sort of an ante. It's just, that's what, of course it keeps time. This little watch company decided that what really mattered to customers was personal expression. And of course the Swatch watch was born and made Seiko and Casio, their value proposition fairly irrelevant, where customers were, they were getting the functional benefit of timekeeping, but they had this added layer of personal expression. That's what that Swatch meant to them. And that's the thing that early stage founders have to propose. They have to propose a new meaning, something that is not functional, but highly emotional. And where founders get trapped is they're all heads down in the functions of their products. The functions, the features. Oh, we have more features than our competitor, or, none of that matters to the customer that's going to be that early advocate of your business. They want a deeper emotional connection with the value that you provide, which has a existential meaning to the customer. It's more than the thing. And that's the hard thing for founders to get their heads around. What is it that how can we present ourselves to the marketplace in a way where we become value creators, and essentially in a category all of our own?
Thank you. This is very interesting. You're raising, as I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm just thinking of Tesla and how Elon Musk has managed to create not only a company, but a vision. And
yes, that's a great example. Tesla is a great example.
Talk to me a little bit more talk to our ecosystem a little bit about what do you think is going on with Tesla? Well,
it's interesting that you would bring up Tesla, because General Motors has just gone through a complete rebranding. They're now trying to claim that they have a vision for the EV vehicle going forward. Bear in mind that General Motors, had developed the technology for electric vehicles over 50 years ago, but they decided that's not what they wanted to do. They still wanted to build vehicles based on, fossil fuels, gasoline engines. But it took an innovator like Elon Musk to come along, offer a completely new meaning around the automobile category. And of course, the rest is history. The same way that Sears could have leveraged their mail order heritage, and instead that honor went to Amazon. So these are, success leaves clues. So, for entrepreneurs who are building new companies, they really have to have, especially now, because there's just so much of everything. It's the noise and complexity of the marketplace. It's just a gigantic cacophony of slush and mush. You've got to break through. And the only way that you can do that is to represent an idea of value that is in high demand and in short supply. The other key to that is customers don't know what they want. Usually what they want is something, that has a couple more features and at a cheaper price. So proposing these new meanings, these new emotional connections to customers, it's a difficult process if you think on the competitive plane. You really have to move out of that competitive plane, that zero-sum game, we win, they lose, and you have to move into the creative plane where you're proposing a new meaning, something that customers, weren't asking for, but once it's revealed to them, becomes the very thing they'll stand in line for. As you recall, none of us were saying, gee, it'd be great if we had an iPhone. But we had smartphones, but once the iPhone was revealed, no one was asking for an iPhone. But once it was revealed, it became the thing people were waiting for, just not asking for. And it's that kind of approach to innovation that separates those early stage companies that will leave the early struggle phase and move into the more what I call the scale phase, which is for founders fun. You've got your business is growing and scaling, and that's the fun stage. Early struggle, not so fun. So that's sort of philosophically the idea. I can see Corey.
Yeah. So I guess well, we might have lost George for a minute there, but
That's okay.
so what we mentioned before we hit record is that we're really excited to learn about, like, with your approach, with your philosophy, and with your experience, that helped inform your voice and message through 2020. And there was a lot of talk of the great pause, and what are you going to do with this time, and
it was a great pause, unless of course you happen to be in e-commerce. The only category that seemed to weather this great tribulation, as it were.
Right.
So many other industries have been decimated, including consulting. In my business, it's interesting. I've been working this way, digitally this way, for several years now. It was only coincidentally the whole work from home movement and the way we now have to work, in the COVID era of 2020. I've been working this way for several years, and I've discovered, though, in my business, the issue hasn't been so much the delivery with clients, the delivery of value. It's been the demand.
Right. Yeah.
Small businesses, right now, most small companies are keeping their powder dry. They're not making large expenditures. They're not bringing in consultants to help them. Not, some are, but generally speaking, the people I work with, the early stage founders, they they haven't had a lot of demand right now for the kinds of, because they're just trying to stay alive. They're
Right.
just trying to stay alive.
I consulted myself out of a book of clients in the beginning of the pandemic, and it's taking.
Well, and that's a whole other thing. Yeah, when you're consulting with a client, the idea of a consultant is, if you're doing your job right, you're going to work your way out of a job.
Well, I had to help some wind up their business. I had and have to have the conversation. Well, you know what? I'm a nice to have. I'm not a need to have at this point.
Yeah, me too. I'm definitely. I'm not, that there's a thing about outcomes. There's blatant outcomes, things that business owners have to invest in, or there's a penalty for not investing. For example, if you're a tax accountant, those are, you have to invest in those types of consultants, or there's a big penalty for not investing in that activity. In our work, or at least in my work, there's no penalty if you don't if you don't invest in what I do. There's potentially what's the opportunity costs, but those are abstract at the early stages. Founders don't really know how to quantify opportunity cost.
Right. Nor do they often think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So there might be an opportunity cost for not bringing in a management consultant, or a process consultant, or a subject matter expert. I'm a subject matter expert. I'm not a process expert. I'm not gonna tell you how and what to levers to pull and tweak, but I will be able to help you put together a strategic roadmap that, if you commit to implementing it, you'll receive a lot of quantifiable benefits.
So with the approach and the philosophy, and the time to reflect and think, and congratulations on making it past January 1.
Yeah, it's been, I've in my own thing. I'm new. I moved across the country here just before, in the middle stage of 2019. I came back to Grand Rapids, a personal life move to be closer to my family. And then COVID hit, and I've been pretty much isolated for the entire year. So that's had some effects on my thinking. But I've moved in different areas. I have other interests besides consulting, music, art, all of those kinds of things that have kept me from going crazy.
Right, of course. But as an intellectual, and when we have a pause like this, and you have the ability to reflect and think so much, and not only on the body of work that you're coming from, but where we're headed, and having weathered a few storms that they don't equate to the pandemic, but they were.
Well, the financial crisis is the only is the only other event that I can, put what I've personally gone through, and what I've seen some of the other people I've worked with go through is, these are seminal events. They're once in a lifetime for many people.
So as that subject matter expert, and having no ability but to apply your brainy, nerdy subject matter expert self to the
my dorky subject matter expertise.
But with that perspective, what are some of the key lessons that you're taking away personally, even though you didn't have skin in the game as much? What are some of the lessons that you're taking out of 2020, and how does that inform your expectations, hope, or fear for 2021?
Well, I'm looking at 2021. I still think that the circumstances of 2020 are going to be with us for the majority of 2021. So I don't see this big line. There was 2020 and then 2021. I think we are still in it right now. And it's not just COVID. I mean, there's a lot of, particularly, around the world, there's a lot of, there's a lot of economic uncertainty for sure. But here in the US, we have a lot of political uncertainty and a lot of political bickering that's taken up a lot of bandwidth.
Brands and companies right now are finding how important it is to be able to demonstrate your values.
Yeah, and this circumstance has been we've all, it's like, who was it that said, when you get to see, what's underneath the skirt when the tide goes out, or something to that effect. We've seen a lot of that this year. You've seen a lot of companies that have, touted a high-minded value system, but in reality, they behave in a quite a different manner. And also, we've seen a lot of companies that have stepped up, that have really sort of embraced the shift that the COVID issue has put upon us. I think the big thing is work from home. That's great unless you got 3 kids under your desk. Working from home's great, but your kids got to be in school too. So it's really been a struggle for a lot of people. It's been a struggle, in the CEOs that I've been talking with, in the conversations I have. They're struggling. The big issue for most of them is just strictly, is cash flow, keeping people employed, keeping their businesses viable.
Is there a shift in like the who of and the why of businesses? Like, does that have to evolve? Do we have to make sure we're still relevant at all? Like,
well, I think what we've learned, or I say we, I think the founders that I talk to, I think what they've learned is that they can live without a lot of the things that they thought they couldn't live without. And that's I think a profound shift, particularly when it comes to physical things like overhead and all of the accoutrements of they can live without that, and many are not going to go back to signing up for large physical infrastructure. I don't think I can give you an example. I have a good friend who's in the defense industry, and he works for, he's an executive in a large global organization, and they're getting rid of all of their office buildings. They don't need them, and that's going to have a ripple effect to all of those real estate investment trusts that have built these office parks all over the country and big office towers. These corporations are we don't need all that. So the hoteling and the like the WeWork, and we have them here in West Michigan too. We have the hoteling kinds of, so that's I think going to be how people are particularly knowledge workers in particular. If you have to show up and work on a machine, that's a different thing, but I'm talking about knowledge workers. If it's neck up, there's less and less physicality.
Well,
and it's happening with our consumer behavior. We're not going to big malls anymore. We're buying stuff online, getting our food delivered online. I mean, it's become a non-physical world very quickly. The things that we're driving, sort of economic drivers, are becoming irrelevant thanks to COVID.
Right. I think like every industry, is in a period of rethink or restructure, and trying to quickly adapt. You were speaking about some of the changes as far as like this hoteling model, and here in West Michigan, we have no shortage of like logistics companies and office parks, like you had just mentioned. one of the largest ones. I was speaking with one of their owners, and they were saying that they were chopping up. They have a lot of demand for their warehouses, but not for 40,000 square feet,
Yeah,
140,000 square feet.
yeah.
Um,
No, they don't need that.
but instead of operators like trying to open up like decent sized retail locations, they are leveraging organizations like Fair and Amazon, et cetera, but they still need that truck dock, and they still need the benefits of a large warehouse facility, but they want that cut up. So it's kind of like a WeWork for trucking, um, and that's
Yeah,
they're trying
they,
to figure
it's
out a way to make that
everything is print on demand. You know, it's, you know, you don't need to sustain the investments in infrastructure. It can be, everything is on demand. You scale it as you need it.
yeah, and it's
Does this make us more vulnerable though?
Oh, I'm not. There's vulnerabilities in any system, you know, just because we're human beings, we're not infallible. But you know, our economy, you know, our economy being a Western capitalist economy that's driven by continued consumption. In other words, that model has to, in order for that model to work, people have to continue to consume. And that's starting to change. People are getting to that tipping point where they're consumers in particular are recognizing that their consumption behaviors are changing, shifting. And business organizations are in a place where they have to respond to that shifting, you know, consumption behavior. So I think if there's any vulnerability, it's just being able to understand that continuous nonstop consumption is a thing of the last century. So we're going to have to.
Can you talk more about that?
Well, I can speak to it in terms of the, you know, people are not just conspicuously consuming like they, you know, like you know, earlier in the say in the go-go 80s and go-go 90s. It's people are not spending like they used to, because the economy is forcing them to, you know, be more mindful of their consumption behaviors. The way that we purchase products, particularly food, that's changing. You know, the price. By the way, the price of groceries and all of that is, you know, is accelerating. So that's driving another shift in purchase behavior. It's funny that, you know, it's pretty sad when the grocery store is the center of your social life. Which, you know, I look forward to going to the grocery store. I don't want my stuff delivered because, you know, I need to get out. I need to meet with human beings. I you know, so, but that's just me. You know, I live in a downtown environment. I live in a high-rise apartment building, and our lobby is just chock full of Amazon boxes. I mean, literally, to get out of the building, you have to navigate around them. So I don't know that that's going to change. I really don't. And you know, I'm in the older generation. I'm a baby boomer, so you know, my frame of reference is different than somebody that's you know, a Gen X or a millennial.
Well, let me ask you again against the background of the discussion so far, where do you expect failures, and what kind of failures do you expect? in which sectors, in which businesses, in which kind of thinking do you expect failures based on your 4 pillars?
I don't. Let me make sure I understand your questions. You mean what types of businesses are going to struggle through this
Absolutely,
process?
but also think a little bit at a higher level. I mean, you mentioned before Sears, the catalog was taken over by AWS.
Yeah, I mean, 100 years ago, Sears was the Amazon of its day.
Okay, so
And
can you go through sectoral shifts that you see, but also at a higher level, at the level of the society as a whole? Again, granted that we are America-centered, we hear some of your comments being echoed by our chapter directors throughout the globe.
yeah, this is not a U.S. This is a global. This is relevant to the global economy, but from rich economies, well-developed economies, to third world and underdeveloped economies. This is the globe we're talking about, and I think politically, there was a time then when the United States was the was the engine of manufacturing, was the engine, but that's no longer the case. That China owns that now. That's things are made in China now, as well they should be. They're far more innovative than we are. They're able to. I was just watching a video the other day of heavy industrial manufacturing, like steel, making large machine parts. And this was a company in China. And I remember, earlier in my career working for in the automotive industry, in the automotive supplier industry, those companies that made piston rings and heavy duty machine parts and things like that. There were heavy industries, and it was a very dark and just a really difficult sort of place to work. And then I'm looking at this video of a Chinese company that's doing heavy smelting, industrial type manufacturing, and the factories are impeccably cleaned, and their employees are properly taken care of in terms of the equipment, the protective. I mean, it just seems to be they have a more sophisticated, more caring, more collective approach that U.S. manufacturing never had in those early industrial days. The United States is still we still drive the intellectual property around. I mean, things may be made in different parts of the country, but the brain trust is still in the developed economies, particularly Western Europe, Germany in particular, and the United States. It used to be Japan was the manufacturing center. Now that's moved to China and Southeast Asia, and those shifts aren't coming. We're not going back to the good old days. And to me, I think that's a good thing. I'm a proponent of globalization, because I think that it's out of that other economies will develop, and will be able to take advantage of the benefits of those strong economies around the world. I really think that all of that has a long-term positive effect, even though week to week it seems right now it seems rather difficult. And that's of course driven by what we're dealing with here in the U.S. with our kind of weird political shit show, if you will.
Well, first of all, thank you. You're touching on some of the macro trends which are relevant, of course, and they're driving and they get affected by the underpinning both political forces and economic forces.
Yeah, we're all connected here. It's as above, so below. I mean, you cannot look at any economic activity separated from the whole. We're so interconnected now that we can't to even think that that you can break off something and have it be its own system separate from another. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts, to use that old cliche. And I think that's where we are right now. COVID going forward, that's an issue that'll be with us, I think, until I'm not trying to be pessimistic or anything, but I really think that 2021 is going to be as challenging as 2020. And if you're in the restaurant business, I'm hoping that, because that's difficult, because that's a lot of employment is in those industries, travel, entertainment, food service, all of that. That's not going to be a thriving business in 2021. And even and the companies that I deal with, usually these are, I'm dealing more with, consumer products companies, food, beverage, consumer products, hard goods, consumer durables, health, beauty, those types of products. It's all shifting depending on the category you're in, and depending on the dynamics of the channel in which consumers are, and it's all moving into digital delivery. I mean, it's physical stuff, physical infrastructure. I was just reading an article how many the retail sector, how many retailers have gone the wayside this past year. I mean, big chains, typically tied to large mall developments. What are we going to do with all these shopping malls? I think Amazon will buy them and turn them into distribution centers.
The next point in our conversation, Thomson, that I think is important we address is the perspective of the owners and CEOs that you have been talking to. What do they see as the biggest challenge for 2021? Is it human capital? Is it distribution? Is it technology? Is it
demand? Capital. I think it's demand.
Okay.
And everything flows out of that. No demand, that it's all connected. I don't think that the demand side of the economy is going to be strong in 2021. I really think that that'll be a challenge for most what I would consider traditional businesses. I'm not involved in the manufacturing sector enough to know. Certainly durable goods, the demand for manufactured goods, that's going to be a challenge, I think, for 2021 in consumer-based categories. Tech, B2B and tech, that's a whole different dynamic. But I still think the same thing is true. I mean, look how we communicate now. I mean, what we're doing right here, I think that's here to stay. If you're working neck up, I think that's it. The good news is working neck up offers a lot of opportunity. But if you're tied to physical infrastructure, that'll be difficult, to continue to support, the employment base. There's, how many jobs were lost this last month in the U.S.? Over 100,000 people filing for unemployment for the first time just in the last month. So, like I said, it certainly affected my business. I'm nowhere near what I was doing in 2018 and 2019. 2020 was kind of a suspended animation year for me as a consultant.
I hear the same thing from many other consultancies. You're not alone.
Yeah, no, I know. We have a pity party every Friday after. I've got several consultant friends that we get all over the world, and it's difficult for consultants unless you're a process consultant and you're solving specific types of process-oriented, issues and problems. But I'm a subject matter expert. I'm not a process consultant. I don't provide services. I provide advisory expertise that right now is not in high demand. There's definitely a need. There's no question about the need, but the ability to have the resources to invest in it, if you're a founder of a small consumer products company doing less than $1 million a year, you definitely have the need for people like me, but you don't have the resources right now to invest in it.
Okay, let's move very quickly to the next category that I want to discuss with you. Essentially, the family-owned business, not corporate, not private equity-owned, but simply the mom and pop businesses. What do you see there?
You're talking about mom and pop retail, or
you define it.
Well, I have one of my clients is that I've advised here for the last couple of years is a mom and pop business, and they're in the consumer durables category. They're not in food and beverage, but they make a product that is it's a consumer durable. It's a mom and pop business. In the early part of their development, they want to they want to be in major retail channels, which has been a real challenge for them, because retail buyers, like the big box, they're paring down the number of product lines that they carry. They're that's reducing. So my advice to them, they said, well, what if we go and develop a direct to consumer business? And I thought, well, that's certainly an option, but what they fail to realize and underestimate is that building a direct to consumer business, but in other words, online, that requires a lot of advertising spend to drive traffic to that site, money that they don't have. And they were started out as a mom and pop selling their products at farmers markets. And they were selling out, every Saturday or Sunday. They were, whatever farmers market they were in, they were completely selling out. And I said, this is something that you can own and develop, keep the focus in that space, that channel, and certainly do direct to consumer, because their farmers market business is where they can meet real people, and they sell the product at the farmers market, and it's a product that you're going to need again and again and again. So then they can say, hey, you purchased it here at the farmers market. When you need more of it, just go to our website. We have a club. All of those things tie in together, and they have a pretty thriving business, and they've decided that they don't need to spend any money trying to be in Whole Foods, for example. So
that's a great example of actually going back, not forward integration, but backwards to the roots. And
to the roots, to the roots, trying to keep, keeping, the old saying, sticking to the name. They know how to do it, and they build relationships with customers. They're smart. They collect email addresses, and they build a as I said earlier in our call, top of our call, they're building that community of advocate customers who will be, driving their growth. And by the way, eventually, Whole Foods and retail channels like that will eventually seek them out. and they'll be in a stronger position to negotiate better deals.
Thank you.
Because right now, if you're selling in Whole Foods, number one, it takes forever to get paid. Number two, if it doesn't sell, they ship it back to you, and it's not a very good business to be in, unless of course you're PepsiCo or Kraft, or if you're a big food company, yeah, then it's a different story. But my world is founders, CEOs of small businesses.
We're coming up towards the end of our time, and I wanted to ask you, what kind of advice would you give to young owners, startup developers? What would you highlight beyond the 4 pillars in terms of looking out for?
Slow and steady wins the race.
Okay.
Don't be in a big hurry to try to limit your don't carry a lot of debt. It really is that slow and steady. That's the advice I give. I had a conversation with a founder of a company that made faucets for your sink, for your bathroom. They made one faucet. It had a particular feature that enabled you to like the old faucets in Italy. If you've ever been to Italy, the common drinking fountains that come out of the street fountains in Italy. They made a faucet that enables you to, instead of water coming down, it goes up, and you can brush your teeth, what have you. Interesting idea. They made one product, one design. The founder told me they had invested in the 2 years that they started the company. They invested over $1.5 million, and they have no customers. So before you go out and invest a lot of money in marketing and a lot of, you've got to make sure that the market cares about what you're doing. It may matter to you, but if the marketplace doesn't reward it, it's a hard road to go. So slow and steady, make sure that, there definitely is, and it doesn't have to be like that, oh, there's a market for this, but you have to know that once your innovation is revealed to a potential customer, it becomes the thing they were waiting for. And that's a high bar.
It seems to me you're asking many young entrepreneurs to think like Steve Jobs, and that's not easy.
Well, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, you name it. I mean, anybody that's bringing remarkable products to market. No, the world doesn't need any Me Too products. We don't need another faucet. And how's that small company gonna compete with Kohler and a number of companies that there's just it doesn't matter, and nobody cares about a faucet that turns into a drinking fountain in your bathroom. I mean, and they tell me, oh, it's won a lot of design awards. Yeah, well, so what? These are the kinds of things that founders, they get so wrapped up into their innovations, into the I had another conversation just recently with a founder that had a beverage product, and I just said, we don't need another bubbled water product. There's no reason to have another bubbled water product. And but it's they're way into what they're doing. What matters to you, the marketplace has to reward. So when those two things come together, that's what I call the white hot center of your competitive advantage. You have to get that figured out before you spend $1.5 million trying to get your innovation into the marketplace. Slow and steady wins the race.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great wisdom in these words. Corey.
From my mouth to God's ears.
Yeah, Thompson, I wish we were doing this in person because you're a lot of fun in person. You're good fun on Zoom, but
Yeah, I'm better in person, especially if we could go have a beer or just get some nachos.
couple
Just-
Mai Tais, right?
It's
So,
I would like
but-
some of that part of life to come back to normal, please.
Well, since you and I both are in the same city, and I rarely have the opportunity to suggest this with our guests in our conversations, but City Built Brewing has an amazingly large, socially distanced, and warm tent.
Who has this now?
City Built Brewing. It's the building I live in, around the corner from you, and they just finished brewing an excellent Pilsner, and they have the best Peruvian food in Michigan. So.
Really? Well, where have you been all my life?
Alone lately. So,
Yeah, me too, alone.
Anyway, that aside, how can people get in touch with you if they are that?
Well,
person?
of course they can go to my website. You can search me on LinkedIn. You can Google Thomson Dawson, but my website is www.whiteHotCenter.com. whiteHotCenter.com. Operators are standing by.
All right.